All right. Welcome back, everyone. We have such an exciting episode today. I feel like this is the moment that we have all been waiting for.
Well, we did have one guest a couple weeks ago, little Lily.
Little Lily, of course.
She was a lot hairier than our
But you've
guest
just-
we have
I was
today.
about to say, what? I'm the first.
And also, you've just totally given away my big announcement. I was about to say,
I haven't shut up though.
we have a guest. But before we introduce this mysterious guest, we're going to start with our mindful breath. So wherever you are and whatever you're doing, take a nice slow breath in through your nose and really gently let the breath go. Okay.
Before we start this episode, as a very passionate Warramungu Yari woman, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land we are recording this podcast from, and honour their ongoing connection to country, community and culture. I wouldn't be me without the sacrifices of my ancestors, and for that I pay my deepest respect and extend that respect with love to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and all elders past and present. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Now, I am very grateful, first and foremost, to have this special person joining us today. This is somebody that I've grown very close to over the last 12 months. So I'm super grateful to Ella for having taken the time out to be with us today. And I know that this conversation, there's just going to be so much in it. So I can't wait to get cracking. So with that said, I feel like it's probably a nice opportunity to touch on where Ella and I connected. So Ella Pike is our guest today, who is known as the Breath Boss on Instagram. She is the co-founder of the Breath Haus. She is an absolute little angel that walks this earth. And I remember following Ella on Instagram sort of during the COVID times, or just as we were coming out of them. And she was just always popping up and doing all of this amazing stuff and bringing community together on the beach during COVID in Elwood. And I was always just really admired what she was able to do for people during that time. And then, of course, I started attending the Breath Haus about a year ago, and that place has just completely taken over my life in the best possible way. It's the community that has been created through the Breath Haus in such a short space of time is so admirable, and I'm obsessed with it. And to think that in the space of a year, alongside her business partner Nathan, they've been able to open 3 Breath Haus studios is absolutely mind-blowing, and I can't wait to talk more about all of this. But Els sent through a little bit of a bio earlier this week, and I just want to read out a little bit to give some context into who Ella Pike is. Even though she's sitting here and like giggling and cringing, it's sometimes like when you write
Such a cringe moment. I'm like, I don't want to listen.
Well, you have to.
But it's beautiful. We were
I'll
like,
breathe
how do
through
we
it.
integrate this? And I was like, we definitely have to, because I think that this really sets the scene for who Ella Pike is. She's a breathwork facilitator, a believer of magic, a seeker of slowness, and a lover of discomfort in all ways that push you to be better. Elle used to live life numb to the world and addicted to her own suffering. She didn't believe she was worthy or capable of a life that felt good all of the time. She resisted slowness, sitting with herself and breathwork, until one day her world came crashing down and she couldn't run from herself anymore. She surrendered to a breathwork session and met herself with the most intense resistance, until suddenly it had been the moment she'd searched for her whole life. She now lives for the beautiful moments that helps others to grow and uncover the ecstasy that exists on the other side of discomfort Oof, I love that. This is why she does what she does, and she wants everyone to experience the pure bliss that we are all so capable of experiencing. Welcome, Els.
Oh, keep
Why is it so
going.
weird when someone reads it about you? I'm like, oh, hi, is that me?
That is
No, but my smile's really big.
that is such a good bio, and I just think that speaks to the magic of who you are perfectly.
So
Hi.
welcome.
Thanks for
Ella.
having me. As your second official guest.
Yeah, I mean,
Less
first
hair.
less hair.
Hopefully.
Super cute though, both very cute guests.
So, yeah, really to reiterate what Megzy said, it is such a pleasure to have you here as the first guest sitting on our brown couch, because Lily sat on the blue couch, to be fair. So,
Fair.
And just to give some context to Lily, I feel like we're talking about this first guest, but it was Amy, who produces our podcast, sister's little fluffy dog.
yeah, for anyone who watches on YouTube, you'll know who Lily is. It will make sense. So we always start this podcast by asking ourselves, and now our first guest, the question, which is, what's keeping you rushing at the moment?
The Breath Haus is keeping me rushing because of the way that the Breath Haus is growing at the moment, and how from the moment that we decided that we were the Breath Haus, it just has not stopped. And it's amazing. Don't get me wrong. Like, I say this all with the biggest smile, but that's definitely what keeps me rushing at a pace that I try to avoid. But I can't help it. I'm getting better at finding balance, way better. But the Breath Haus and the growth of the Breath Haus is keeping me very busy.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously a very busy woman in business, and we are going to dive into that in way more detail. But I'd actually love to take us back to the beginning. I'd love to know about your relationship with breathwork and where that does begin.
So I laughed at it. That's my favorite thing to always say at the start, is I just thought that it was the silliest thing. Like, I was definitely one of those people that was like, I'm always breathing. I don't need to breathe. Like, what's it going to do? I'm always breathing. And I also just was like not a happy person. And so I didn't really have a good time until I had good times every now and again, but it was very much with external things. Like, it was very much on the weekend with my friends. I lived for the weekend. I kind of just was a very low vibrational, very dense person who was always kind of eating her feelings or drinking her feelings. And I was just at this level, like right down here, but didn't even realize it. And then when I was 25, I'd been living in Melbourne for 3 years, and I had become super addicted to Xanax, and I was eating them like lollies, not understanding how naughty they were, and drinking wine every night and smoking heaps of weed and eating heaps of food, and just, yeah, it all just kind of kept getting more piled on top. And then one day I had a big fight with my ex-boyfriend, which triggered this like full psychosis moment, which meant I just couldn't keep running, because I was kind of like literally strapped to a bed in a hospital being like, you need to acknowledge what's going on for you. And so I went back home to Byron, and I spent 7 weeks there. And then I came back down to Melbourne, and I had come off Xannies. I'd come off everything that I was kind of addicted to. And I started to seek that all out again. And when I started to seek that all out again, some people were like, just try breathwork. And I was like, shut the fuck up. It's not my thing. And then a couple of people sent me the same link to a session. And I laid down and I laughed and I laughed and I hated it and I hated it. And he told me I would want to run away from myself, and I wouldn't want to stay in the session, and I had to like just stay laying down and breathing. And I ran away, and I was like, just go back and lay down and do it for once. Like, do one thing for yourself so you can tell everyone you've done it. And it just kept going, and I kept hating it. And then all of a sudden I was not in my head anymore, and I was like going back and experiencing these things that like, it was just all these aha moments and all these like pieces of the puzzle that I didn't realize I was trying to put together, just all falling together and all just making sense. And it was just this high that I'd never felt before. And he said at the end, I remember laying on the bed and we'd just done this massive primal scream into a pillow, which at the start when he said, we're going to scream, I was like, no, I'm not screaming. Like, there's no way. And then everything that he said would happen happened. So I was like, I'm screaming. And that was like the cherry on top of the whole experience. And before that, I don't think I'd ever ever used my voice, like in any way, shape or form. Unless I was really drunk and really angry, I wouldn't have ever set a boundary or done anything like that. And that's why I didn't want to scream, like, because I was so scared of that. And then I was laying there on my bed after that session and he said, welcome home to yourself. And up until that exact moment, I'd always been like, shut up, you're home, it's your body, like get a grip. And I was like, oh my God, this is what they all mean. I was like, this is that feeling. And that was just the start. And then the next day I did my first ever ice bath after thinking that I was like, I'm not a cold person. I don't like the cold. I literally went to the end of the street and got 2 bags of ice from the BWS and walked back and put it into my tiny little bathtub in my apartment. And I had a half ice bath and then booked a breathwork retreat for 2 weeks away. And then that was the start.
God, there's so many things that resonate with what you just said about your first experience with breathwork. Firstly, before I share anything to do with my experience with breathwork, I just want to acknowledge, thank you for sharing that, because
I'm always like, that's a trauma dump and a half, but like, hope that inspires someone.
No, absolutely it does. And like, I think it takes a lot of bravery and courage to be as vulnerable as you are, and it's so appreciative, and it helps other people feel vulnerable as well. And I think that's a big it's one of the massive parts about why I really admire you so much, is because you've used your adversity or like the challenges in your life, and you've been able to turn them around and literally create already an empire and like touch so many people's lives along the way through the Breath Haus. Like, it's absolutely wild. And not just the Breath Haus, like all the other things that you're kind of doing as well. And you know, had you have not gone through all of those hardships, you would not be where you are today. And so I really just want to acknowledge that firstly, but agree. And I think, you know, talking about the breathwork experience, I remember the first time I ever did a session was very similar. I was in a really dark time in my life as well, and it would have been about 5-6 years ago. The Saturn returns phase of my life, which we've spoken about on a previous episode. And I was just going through a really shit time. And I remember the same thing. I remember going into this workshop environment, similar to when you run your like little lunas through the Breath Haus.
Yeah.
And it was like a 2 or a 3 hour long. And I have just never had an experience like that before, where I just like purged. Like, I didn't even know I had that much emotion in me. And it just brought everything to the surface. And I had every sensation that they talk about happened. And it was like I felt like I'd been on a bender minus the drugs, and it was like the best feeling in the world, like euphoric, so much so that the next weekend I brought my girlfriend along with me and she had a similar experience, and it was just mind-blowing. And so I think that, that breath work is really quite a magical tool, but I guess it poses the question, like, why does that happen? Like, what happens? Like, and that's not necessarily always the experience of breathwork either. There are so many variations of breathwork practices, and you know, I kind of want to get into sort of what you offer at the Breath Haus, because I think sometimes people can almost deter people from coming to a breathwork experience sometimes, because if they think that they're going to have this big drastic like release and outburst, that can be really quite overwhelming for a lot of people. So I think it's important to note that it's not always like that. There are certain workshops and things that you go to have that experience. And I think it's important because that's what I really want to get into, like kind of actually unpacking what breathwork is, a little bit of the science behind it. Why do we get all these tingly sensations, and why does this emotion surface?
So the emotion is my favorite thing to talk about, because that was the thing that caught me off guard the most the first time. Like, I remember there was the battle at the start, and like what you said, it's not always emotional. Like, classes, sometimes it's emotional in like an hour class, sometimes a 20-minute session can make you feel really emotional, but I find personally, from what I've witnessed and what I have had for myself happen, it's always the longer, a little bit more cathartic, like the longer sessions that help you get out of your kind of monkey mind and into deeper parts of your body that become quite intense emotionally. But that was what took me off guard the biggest that first time. That didn't even make sense what I said. But anyway, that's what caught me off guard the most that first time, was the emotion, because I was laying there and I was battling with myself. And then all of a sudden I was like thinking about something that happened when I was 12 or 13 that I'd never thought about. And it's like my body finally had a moment to go back and experience the thing that I didn't feel safe enough to experience in the time, right? And I didn't feel safe enough to have the reaction that my body wanted me to have because it wasn't a safe environment for me to, like, I couldn't be emotional at that point because it wasn't appropriate, or I was scared to be emotional. And like that happened. And then there was a moment when I was 19 and I was having this fight with my sister, and I like relived this fight with my sister in that session. And then all of a sudden I was 22 and having this conversation with my mom. And then it was like a year before that session, and I was reliving this other experience, and all in my mind in this one, probably the last hour of that session, I had gone through all of these emotions that now looking back, I could never actually fully surrender to at the time because it wasn't appropriate, it wasn't safe. And that was like the craziest thing for me, because I felt so much lighter, and I felt so much just like there was just this clearness in my body afterwards that I didn't even know that I had been energetically holding on to. And that was probably the most profound thing for me in that first moment, like just finishing that session, laying there and being like, why did I just think about all of those things that have happened over the last decade of my life right now, being 24, laying on the bed in the middle of a breathwork session? And then when you go into it, emotion, energy and motion, you know, like you feel in your body when you want to get angry at something and you can't actually punch the thing that's in front of you because it's not appropriate, but you feel that heat and you're like, oh, or like the sadness, right? Like you want to burst. And it happened to me just before with my business partner. I wanted to cry, but I was like, I can't cry now because that's going to validate the story in his mind about this moment that we're having. So I didn't cry, but I felt the sadness. And it's like when you cultivate that feeling and that like emotion in your body, and your mind goes, oh, no, thank you. And you push on, that stays there. So when you get to stop and you get to breathe and, you know, you feel the energy that you start to build up in your body, and you get out of that kind of monkey mind and you go into deeper parts of your mind and deeper parts of your body. Like when you go into your limbic brain, you allow your body to surrender to that in like a safe environment. You know what I mean? So that was like that was my biggest thing in my first one.
Was that first breathwork session you did an in real life experience, or
No,
was that
on Zoom.
online?
That was on Zoom. And I think also for me, and the fact that I was so insecure with using my voice, I don't think I would have had the same experience had I not been in my own bed.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that is because I know that there are so many people out there who do feel afraid of breathwork because, you know, and we're probably perpetuating that fear in some ways because we really are talking about the most intense responses to
this was also a breakthrough breathwork session, just like prefacing that. It was like a 2.5 hour journey of like it's like the workshop. It's like you're going there to get out of your comfort zone and have an experience that's not just like, oh, that felt cool. You know, it's like, let's go see what this can do.
Yeah, and we should certainly talk about the different types of breathwork as well, because, yeah, to your point, we're really talking about the probably more extreme practices. But for someone out there who feels terrified of the concept of breathwork, you know, we're so lucky to live in a day and age in which online practices are so available and accessible. And so I think it's really important just to name that was an online experience you had that was actually incredibly profound, but still in the privacy and comfort in your own space.
But I also think, actually, I want to mention one more thing. I don't think that being so skeptical of breathwork and being so ADHD and all of those kind of things, had I not had the depth of that experience, I wouldn't be here, because I needed the 40 minutes to get out of my head, and I needed the length of the time and the intensity of the time to have an experience that made me believe in the practice. Had I just gone to an hour-long class, the 40 minutes where I was like, oh, shut up, I just would have stayed there, and then I would have got up and gone, that validated the story. Like, it's not my thing, it's not for me, and I wouldn't have ever believed in myself. You know what I mean?
And it sounded like at that point in your life with where you were at, you'd kind of got to a point where you were like, I know I'm in a pretty shitty, dire place right now. I'm willing to just crack the door down to explore anything that might help, even though you were a little bit like resistant. Well, a bit resistant actually.
A lot. And like I'd just done all this. I'd just lost like probably 15 kilos. And so I was like, I am fixed. I'm better. I'm like this, I'm that, you know, because I was like eating clean. I was like doing all of the external good things. So I was like, I'm all better. I'm all that. But I still had that like gravitational pull. I'd bought 2 more Xannies since I came off them. That's why I did the breathwork session, because I was like, I'm just going to get 2. It's fine. I'll just have half. And it's like, it's not fine, babe. It's actually not fine. Like, no, you need to lay down and do something else. So had I not had that, I don't think I would have done. I don't think we'd be sitting here right now.
I'm so glad that we are.
Yeah.
I love that saying, what's in the way is the way. And often it's the thing that we feel most resistance to, that if we lean into it, it actually provides the most profound impact and change. It sounds like that's really true in this instance.
100%.
So yeah, I'd actually love just to hear your definition of breath work and your understanding of breath work and all of the different modalities and how breath work works.
So breath work is any conscious awareness of your breath, I feel. And breath work is also like an ancient practice that we're just like bringing new light to now because of the age of social media and the age of, I guess, like everyone's looking to empower themselves now and not to kind of run from themselves, I guess, as much. But breath work in its most simple form is conscious awareness of the breath. And I think that the different ways that you can practice breath work can be from mindfully taking 3 breaths before you eat a meal to noticing the way that you breathe when you're starting to like feel overwhelmed or chaotic, or noticing the difference between a belly and a chest breath or a nose and a mouth breath. Like it doesn't have to be these longer sessions. It can quite literally just be that moment of breathing before the podcast starts. Like one simple conscious breath is breath work. And then there's like, you can take it to the really intense breakthrough holotropic style, complete like trauma release moments, or you can do, functional breathing and look at the way that you're breathing and how many breaths you're taking per minute and what your tolerance to carbon dioxide is in your blood. Or you can do the breath work that makes you feel high, there's so much. The limit doesn't exist to the magic that is your breath once you get it. And there's there's so many things, but the thing that I always like to just like put in black and white is we all place so much attention on so many external things, like our steps, our food, our water intake, our sleep, our supplements, all this stuff. And there's so many of us who are doing that and breathing in and out of our mouths and into our chests. And it's like your breath is like your life force. You can live with all of those without all of those other things. You cannot go a few minutes without your breath. And you're like, it's like, oh, it's just breathing,
Yeah, there are still there's a lot of skepticism for that reason. It's like, but I'm always breathing all the time. What do you mean I'm breathing wrong?
And then it's like, and then they're like, I don't need, and it's like, okay, breathe really slowly and watch what your body does. Like breathe as slowly as you can, just for literally a minute and watch what your body does. Then breathe as fast as you can for a minute and watch what your body does. Like it's there. It's there. All you have to do is open your eyes to it.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about this and then we can talk about the more kind of breakthrough style of breath work. So what happens when you breathe? Why is it important to breathe through your nose and to breathe slowly? Can you talk through the kind of function of breath?
So if you look at the physiology of our bodies, our mouths aren't made for breathing. Our mouths are like this backup breathing tool that we can use if we need to. And our noses are there as our primary breathing source. And if you put your hand up against your face, that's roughly the size of your nasal cavity. And when you breathe in through your nose, there's all these little hairs in there that produce this gas called nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, which helps the oxygen and carbon dioxide gas exchange flow nicely through your body. It controls the amount of air that you take in. It controls the temperature of the air that you take in. And what else does it do? I feel like there's so much more. It's like the most underrated organ that we have. That's what happens when you breathe through your nose, though, all of that magic. When you breathe through your mouth, none of that happens. Like none of those things happen. And when you breathe through your mouth, you're drying your mouth out. I don't know what the exact study is or the exact percentage, but I think it's like we think that so many cavities in our mouths are caused by sugar, but it's actually mouth breathing.
Wow.
The way that we're drying out our mouths.
Isn't that so wild?
And then what else did you ask? What was the other one? Chest and belly breathing. Okay, this was one of the biggest things for me. I used to be on anti-anxiety tablets and I went to the doctor and I was very much like a external chaser. Like I'd be like, give me a Valium, give me this. Like I wanted more and more things. I would go to the doctor and I was on 2 different kinds of an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety tablet. And I never knew the difference between a belly and a chest breath. And I would go to the doctor and I would just be like, this is what I need. No one ever looked at the way that I breathed.
Isn't that sort of stuff to me is just insane. Like imagine how many less diseases and health problems would be in this world if there was things like that were integrated.
That's like the most common thing. Like I was breathing into my chest, never knew the difference. Never. And I struggled to breathe into my belly. I struggled to feel my belly move at all because as women, I mean, maybe as men as well, but as women, like from an early age, it's like suck your belly in, abs on, shoulders back, like suck in, you know, and then all of a sudden we're pushing our breath up into our chest. And then like our bodies think that we're under attack. Our bodies are like, our ancient bodies are like, there is a tiger behind you, stay on guard. And that's why I think that autoimmune's at like an all-time high and we like can't figure it out. And everyone's like, this is my identity. This is what this is probably a bit of a trigger warning, but like people are so attached to all of these things. And it's like, you're not even looking at the most simple thing. And you're so quick to just turn around and be like, I have this. You can't like describe, like I have this, but it's like you're breathing so dysfunctionally. Go back to the basics.
And you'd see it so often. Like I see it at the Breath Haus all the time. How many people say to me after a class, I really, really struggled to allow the breath to land in the belly. Like we're so conditioned to it being so shallow and so into our chest.
Yeah, and have you, I don't know if you've heard this before, I heard this somewhere, I'm not going to be able to quote the source, but that there's some research that suggests that the human breathing rate has doubled over the last 100 years.
Oh, it's like quadrupled.
Yeah, which directly correlates with all kind of cancer and disease on that upward
I think it's more than doubled. It's doubled in the last... The average breath, my whoop, when I'm over breathing, my whoop tells me that I'm breathing functionally. And I'm like, oh my God, no, I'm not.
Gosh.
I'm like an over breather still. Like I'm trying to reduce my breaths per minute, but whoop is like, you're in the green. No, I'm not. Actually, that's so bad. But yeah, I think it's 4 times. It used to be like 5 breaths per minute. And now it's like an average of like 16 or something like that.
Crazy.
Crazy.
And also, what is it? Whales are the longest living mammals in the world and they take what, like 1 breath an hour or something like that?
Yeah.
And like the more, yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway.
the less something from a big whale.
The less you breathe, the longer you live. That is a thing. But just to come back to what you were talking about before, because you mentioned that you're in the doctor's office, you're wanting your prescription for your anxiety, but then you learn how to belly breathe.
Sidetrack.
I got you.
So I would go there and I was always like searching for more and more things and I wanted more Valiums and I wanted more of all of those things. And then I remember doing my first breathwork session and then diving into it. Like I went head first into it. I was doing like so much breath work every day. I wouldn't shut up about it. Like the reason I'm called the breath boss is because I would go to a run club and I used to be the lash boss because I would do lashes and I was like, don't call me that. I'm the breath boss now. And it just stuck. like literally I went to a run club and I called myself the breath boss because I used to be the lash boss. Amy was there. Amy was literally there. Look at me like getting Amy
Smiling
involved.
and laughing.
But anyway, I became obsessed with it. And then once I started to learn more about it and I learned about belly and chest and nose and mouth and all of that, been taping my mouth now forever since then, and also learnt the difference and realized that I'd only ever breathed into my chest. So I started to breathe into my stomach and that alone completely changed my life.
So, and just to clarify for anyone who doesn't know, what do you mean when you say mouth taping?
So I get micropore tape from the chemist and I quite literally tape my mouth shut to go to sleep at nighttime so that I only use my nose to breathe in and out of while I sleep. So it keeps my body in a deeper sleep and I don't wake up anywhere near as much as I used to. And do you know what? People ask me if I've had my jaw done and I have not had my jaw done. I've just literally become an only nose breather at nighttime for the 8 hours of night that you sleep. And when you are breathing in and out of your nose, your tongue is resting on the roof of your mouth, which is activating all of these little muscles down here. So in turn, chiseling your jaw.
Chisel.
Yeah. And it just keeps your body in a deeper state of relaxation, really. And no, you're not going to choke and die if you don't breathe in and out of your nose. Unless you're putting duct tape around your whole entire face, maybe you've got an issue. But if you're just using micropore tape, you will take it off. Like I've woken up without it on so many times before when my body's needed to take it off and mouth breathe throughout the night.
The deep sleeping associated with mouth taping is massive. I've noticed such a huge difference when I started integrating mouth taping to my sleep. You just go to like this another level
dreams
of
as
quality
well.
sleep. Yeah, when you do it.
And for anyone out there, if you do tend to wake up with a dry mouth, that is a really common sign and symptom that you're mouth breathing while you're asleep. And so I often say to people as well, two things. Give it 7 days, because for the first week you'll notice it in your hair and you'll pull it off without knowing it. But also, if you're someone who does feel like that would be triggering for you for some reason, to place tape over your lips, to just whack it on for 10 minutes during the day when you're on your laptop, and then build that up. So
or if you watch a show at nighttime, just put it on for your show, and then like you're not even focusing on doing that. You're like so distracted, but then you've mouth taped for 45 minutes or an hour.
Oh, that's going to be my new example. Steal that. Like that a lot.
And then you really notice, like once you start to do it, what I find, I mean, it's still very much a work in progress, and I catch myself out, particularly when I'm training, is sometimes when I struggle to get enough air in. But I'm really conscious now of how I breathe, and I really notice when I'm nose breathing and like even going to sleep. Sometimes I don't take my mouth every night before I go to bed, but almost to the point that I don't really need to as much nowadays, because I've trained myself over time to be way more conscious of breathing in through the nose because of it. And you get used to it.
We could obviously talk about kind of functional breathing all day, and it is so important, right?
We're all breathing so we're all breathing so dysfunctionally.
Yeah, and
I'm trying really hard to get better at it, but like also doing so many other things. But we're all terrible breathers,
and it's a really hard thing to retrain. But just to be aware is step one.
It's also a really uncomfortable thing to retrain. Like it's pretty much suffocating yourself. Like it's breathing so slowly and so lightly that you feel like you're choking on air. And that's how you do it, because you build your tolerance up to carbon dioxide, which means you breathe less.
So we breathe in oxygen and out carbon dioxide. People tend to think that breathing is all about oxygen, but actually oxygen without the presence of carbon dioxide doesn't get dispersed to all of the vital places in the body that it needs to. And so it's really important that we build our tolerance to carbon dioxide, because the more that we're over-breathing, or the more that we overbreathe, which we're all doing, the more we dump off the carbon dioxide out of our bloodstream, and then the more sensitive we become to it. The best analogy that I've ever heard is if you think of like a soda stream bottle or like a soft drink bottle, and when you take the cap off, it makes that really satisfying noise. But what happens when you leave the cap off the bottle? Well, eventually the liquid will go flat. And so over-breathing, and particularly as it relates to mouth breathing, is said to leaving the cap off the bottle so that the fizziness of the blood starts to go flat.
Did Johannes tell you that?
Oh, yeah.
I was about to say, that's Johannes.
That is a great
I know that
one. I really want to do my breathless expeditions training.
It's the one that he
there's spots
uses
left
for kids.
with my spot in that weekend that I asked you to cover for me. There's spots left. You should come.
You should do it. But that's the example that he says he uses for children. And I'm like, I tell all adults that.
That was a good one. As you said the fizzy drink, I was like, oh, I know where that one's coming from.
Yeah, so okay. That's Johannes, not me. I did not make that up.
But that's what I like about what's happening with breathwork at the moment, is that there is so much scientific evidence that shows you how much how beneficial breathwork as a practice is. Like it's so evenly spread. You've got the woo-woo, the spiritual side, but then it's like, I'm going to hit you with some serious fizzy analogy explanations here, and it really lands.
Yeah. No, but it's just like the thing that you think about, like the only thing that you can't live without is your breath. It's like, it just is that simple. It's just like, just think about it like that. Doesn't matter how many steps you take. How are you breathing? Honestly.
Preach. So let's pivot and talk about some of the more kind of transformational breathwork practices, like we were talking about at the beginning, right? With emotional release and trauma release and all of these things that, someone would potentially hear on the other side of this podcast and think, oh God, that sounds terrifying. So yeah, what are those practices? What do they offer, and how do they work?
So the breakthrough breath work and like the deeper dives, the way everyone does them differently. So this is like a big thing. Like I was trained in a different way to how I now facilitate like a breakthrough breathwork session. Some other people are completely opposed to the idea of mouth breathing full stop. Like there's so many different ways out there. So this is just how I would facilitate these deeper experiences. So I think that mouth breathing is a really beautiful practice when you know what you're doing, and when you're not like too highly strung, or not highly strung, like filled with anxiety, and like you're not like if you're one of those people who can't breathe and you're always like this and like you're just like that all the time, you're not going to enjoy a mouth breathing session, because it's going to push you too far into the state that you're already in. But just like allowing yourself to be there, and then going into like really gentle nose breaths and doing a body scan, and just starting by making your body feel safe and allowing your body to kind of just be there, and spending like the first 15 to 25 minutes nose breathing, and just trying your best in those 25 minutes to half an hour, whatever it is, to just get out of your analytical mind and get out of the dialogue and my grocery list is this, I should be doing that. Why didn't I write back to that message? Like, use the nose breaths to bring you into your body. And then I like to start the mouth breathing, and I like to go into that heightened state. And then I think that, like I said at the start, it allows your body to surrender to times in your life where you haven't felt safe to surrender to different experiences. And some people, you know, they just sit there mouth breathing the whole time and they just start to really intensify the sensations, and there's not any emotion because they're, you know, maybe a little closed off to the idea of an emotion coming up, or even though they say they feel safe, their body still doesn't feel safe. Like, everyone's so different, but most of the time you prime your body with the gentle breaths, you get yourself into that moment, and then you open the mouth and go into that heightened state to then allow your mind and your body to go back and process things. And then I shouldn't say this online because it'll scare people, but I put a primal scream at the end of every one of my breakthrough breathwork sessions, and I always cue it. Like, when I say that in a group, in a room, I'm like, you can feel everyone, and I'm like, I know how you all just felt because I felt the same thing, but I was like, I also felt that, like, and I did it, and I scream now. Like, I will scream running into the ocean by myself, not even caring who's watching behind me. Like, I have no trouble using my voice anymore. And once upon a time, the idea of screaming into a pillow by myself in my own room was the scariest feeling in my whole body. But I will always finish the session with a primal scream. And 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, it becomes everyone's favorite part because they just grant themselves permission to make a noise, which so many people don't do. So that's how I would facilitate. And then a lot of integration, like then going into nothingness at the end, like just gentle breaths, no breathe, like just whatever you need to do for however long at the end to just let your body melt into that and just kind of, I think that's when the most downloads happen. That's when the most of the puzzle pieces come together, or like the emotion you were feeling then has like a full circle moment at the end here in the stillness. So
I remember coming to yours and Jaden's, one of your breakthrough breathwork workshops at the Breath Haus, probably 6 to 8 months ago. And Jaden, an amazing breathwork facilitator at the Breath Haus, just to give some context on him. But the primal scream thing, I remember you saying it, and honestly, and as somebody who is really open to these sorts of things, I was like, oh, fuck, I don't know if I've got this in me. Like, it feels a little bit uncomfortable, but you're so right.
Petrifying.
Screaming is like, I was like, the sound that I made was insane, but the load that I felt like was lifted off my shoulders by doing that. And it was, I think we did it for like a couple of minutes. Like, it wasn't that long, but it was almost like all of the stuckness that was inside me, this dark grey, sticky, stagnant energy just roared out of me in this sound that I've never heard myself make before. And I honestly remember I felt like I was flying out of the studio that day. And then I think what you do is really beautiful after, which I think is really truly where all of the magic happens in all of that, is by bringing everyone together and opening the forum for people to share, which is such a beautiful way to round out the practice.
Because some people don't have that space to just like unpack, and some people like don't have anyone to go and just like voice their whole, you know what I mean? Like, people don't have people in their life that they feel safe enough to like say whatever that 2 sentences is that's like their full like closing moment of the whole experience. That's my favorite part too. I just sit there sobbing because I'm like, is this real? Do you know one thing I really quickly want to talk about? Because I just think it's important with like the dark matter that you felt come out of you, and like I think the magic that is the breath, those big breakthrough sessions. And I said it before, the word emotion, energy and motion. You know how you can intuitively feel in your body, and I say this at the start of class sometimes, you can intuitively feel in your body if someone has a good or a bad vibe. Like, you can't always feel someone's vibe, I get that, but you can be like, ooh, or that's not it, I need to keep walking. You know, like, that, you felt that feeling. A lot of people are of the opinion that your emotions are stored in your energy field. So the things that you don't grant yourself permission to experience or to get angry about or to cry about in that moment stay dense in your 1.5 meter field, right? And when you lay and you breathe, you can feel your whole entire body start to charge up, and you can feel everything start to move through you. So I believe that's why you start to experience different things, because it's like you have this full channel of energy running through you. And when you allow yourself to scream at the end, you literally purge, I feel, you purge all of the things that have been stagnant in your body. And that's why it becomes like this super animal, like super primal moment with yourself, where it's like you make noises that you didn't know that you could make. And all of a sudden it's like, it's just you're letting go of so many things that maybe you've just never been able to clear, like energetically, and that is why you will fly out, because it's like you're so much lighter.
And that's exactly what it felt like. And sometimes I really wish, because I know that can sound really
So
quite
scary,
cuckoo to a lot of people, but I just wish that people were more open to it, because if only more of us were comfortable enough to explore the depths of ourselves like that, and just be really open to experiences like that, imagine how much lighter the world would be.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so much more to this, right? We can look at it through a scientific lens. We could look at it through the kind of altered state of consciousness lens. And of course, there are so many different types. We've got holotropic, conscious connected, and even that can be a minefield, right? All of the different labels for similar practices. But I think what would be really great is to actually talk about the Breath Haus, where you offer so many of these great practices. And yeah, to talk a little bit about the building of this empire, dare I, and how it all began.
So the Breath Haus began, well, Nathan and I met at the end of 2022, I think. But I think that the reason that the Breath Haus had the crazy, like, just whoa from the second it opened its doors was because in July or June of 2021, I started a different beach community, and I started Feel Good Dips, which is another, like, they meet twice a week and do some breathing sometimes and swimming. And I started that, and that's where I first started facilitating breathwork, and we just ran free breathwork on the beach. And one week we had 5 people, the next week we had 20, the next week we had 50, 2 weeks later there was 200 people. And so I started putting my face out twice a week for 6 months. I think I started that, and then I left that, and I didn't really do much for a couple of months, except I kept taking classes. I started doing my own classes all around Melbourne. Then Nathan and I met, and then we started our own beach community. So we had like this massive community that I'd been building alone, and then him and I built together for a year and a half before we ever even had a studio. And then Nathan and I met. I made him come to some classes with one of our friends, Charlie, and he just we went out for dinner that night with Charlie, and we were all sitting having Mexican, and he's like, you need more, like, we need to do something else, like, you need something else. And I just was such a fairy, still am a fairy, but I was just like, no, I'm happy, like, I just carry my sound balls around in higher spaces. And he's like, no, we're opening a studio. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then
for the ride.
he's literally like, I'm the front, he's the back. And he just, as soon as he decided he was opening a breathwork studio, we were opening a breathwork studio. And the day that we opened the doors, every single one of our classes was full with a wait list for 6 months. And it was the craziest thing. And it just kept going. And like, I think because, like, breathwork is an empowering experience. It's not like, you lay there and you get up and you walk away, and 90% of the time you're like, oh my gosh, and you're completely sober, and you've just had like this life-changing moment in a 45-minute or an hour-long class. So I think that it kind of spoke for itself. And we never did any marketing. Like, we've only just started doing marketing now because we've got 3 studios. And it just kind of, the community was there, and the people were so excited for it, and like so hungry for it.
And I think what you just said, community, I think it just goes to show how much of a need for breathwork there is, right?
But connection, like with yourself and with others, and like just feeling safe to just go somewhere and just like have that experience, and like being in a room with people, whether it's like an emotional experience or a high feeling or whatever it is that you're feeling, it's like you're there together. It's like a oneness, like you're all breathing together, you're all there, you're not sitting, you're all not distracted, like you're being with yourself.
And it's safe. Like that word, I think we've used quite a bit in this conversation today, but it really is like being an environment that is really warm and welcoming and safe enough for you to just feel whatever you need to feel in that moment. I think to maybe give a little bit more context to the Breath Haus and what the offering is there, because we've talked a lot about the breakthrough breathworks, and I'm so proud to be a facilitator at the Breath Haus. It's one of my great joys, and often at the time, I'm a lot of the time really tired, like life gets busy and whatever, and I'm always like pretty tired, but I go to the Breath Haus to teach, and it just like reinvigorates me. Like, you just walk through the doors, and from the minute you walk in, it's this beautiful sensory experience. You get this waft of incense that lands immediately as you enter, and then you walk up the stairs and you're greeted with a hug usually, and then you've got all these beautiful projections of lights, and it's just a really gorgeous sensory experience, and it's just incredible that you've been able to open 3 studios in the space of 12 months, one in Burleigh in Queensland, one in Richmond and one in Windsor here in Melbourne. And I just adore being part of the community there, the people that come through the doors. It's like something that I'm always really blown away at, and I often say it at the beginning of a breathwork class, is that I just can't believe when I look around. Sometimes, I normally teach at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night at Richmond, and that class is often full with like 30-something people in it. And it's like, what? Like 30-something people are coming here every week at 7:30 at night to breathe is amazing. And it's like all genders, all ages, young, old, like it is for literally everyone. And I just love that because it's such a diverse community. But the class offerings, they aren't these big breakthrough breathworks. They're very gentle and short, they're short little sessions. Maybe you're going to be best positioned to explain.
We've got 4 classes, and we've got vibrations is Jaden's specialty class, who we spoke about a little bit before. That's only run in Melbourne at the Richmond studio. That is a sound bath, and Jaden is an incredible sound healer and breathwork facilitator, but he runs a hour-long just sound bath pretty much. You drop in with a bit of gentle breath, go into the sound. He plays like 15 instruments. It's a life-changing moment of stillness. Then we have LSD, which is one of my favorite. It's a cheeky little play on words. It's light, slow, deep, or long, slow, deep. It's a predominantly nose breathing class, so it's very down regulating and very gentle in comparison to release, which is a bit more activating. So that's kind of like your beginner class, if you were going to have a beginner class. And if you're someone who has quite bad anxiety, I would suggest definitely starting with that LSD class. And also if you notice that you're a chest breather, that's definitely your first class too. Then there's release, which is a more active class. It's a little bit more of the stress response mouth breathing class. You do always get primed with the nose breaths. You do get the moments of rest after the mouth breathing rounds. So you do get to kind of come back into your body and it's not too overwhelming for you. And then there is Melt. And Melt is a combination of breath and yin yoga. And it's one of my favorite classes because I, again, used to think that yoga wasn't my thing. And I was like, no. And then a friend touched my body one day and went, you need yin. And I was like, shut up, I don't need yoga. And I remember laying down in my first yin yoga class and being like, oh my God. Oh my God. And I just was like, there we go. That is it. And it was like as mind-blowing for me as my first breathwork class. So now I wanted to like offer that to everyone. So Melt is a combination of breath and yin because God knows we all need some more yin in our lives. And so, yeah, that's the 4 classes.
And to note as well, you do teach classes on Zoom, which I think is really important to share because obviously not everyone lives in Melbourne or Burleigh.
There's also Zoom classes 3 nights a week. And if you wanted to join a Zoom class for free, you can use the code ELLAONLINE when you check out. And that gives you a time online with me for free, just in case. And also we do the breakthrough workshops. So we run a women's circle where it is that really quite intense, raw experience in like a smallish group with quite a few facilitators, and then also a breakthrough event, which is men and women, and with Jaden, the sound healer as well. And that is also the really big deep dive where you're like, you know that you're coming to an intense experience with those 3-hour workshops.
So you've built this incredible business over the course of 12 months, really, a little bit of lead up, but in the grand scheme of time, what you've been able to do in such a short space is mind-blowing. You mentioned Nathan, and I just love that you two are so completely different. It's such an amazing business partner relationship because, as you said, like he's the back, you're the front, you're very much the face, you're very much the community, and he's very much like the business. He's just never not working.
Literally never not working. He's got a grand final footy game this weekend and he's like, if I win, I'm going to go out. And I'm like, I hope that you win. So I hope you don't work for a few days. I'm like, that's the only reason that I hope you win. So you just take some time off.
Just chill. But I guess like a lot of people don't see what goes into building a business and what happens behind closed doors. So I would love it if you could maybe just share a little bit about what is it like a day in the life of you two running a really successful business and continuing to grow it exponentially, and how does that all work?
And also because obviously this is a podcast that really is about rushing and like noticing how we kind of live in this world in which we're all in such a hurry. And yeah, so to Megzy's point, how does that relate to this rapid growth?
So I've burnt out twice in the last year because I tried really hard to keep up with him, and no one can keep up with that man at all. I don't even know how he keeps up with himself. But no, it's wild. He like doesn't ever stop, but he loves it. He loves it so much, and he's so good at it. Anyway, so like he very much, he's the back. He does he's the mind body puppy. He's like the everything to the back end. And I'm everything to the front. So I'm really, really lucky that I do get to, like, part of my job description now, since I've burnt out twice, is slowing down and is not being on my phone for the first few hours of the day, and is kind of like honoring the fact that my whole job is energy exchange, and I need to like respect that with myself, and I need to understand that I can't work the same as him because most of his work is behind a laptop, and it's very, very different to like having uncomfortable conversations and putting yourself up in front of a room full of strangers and sharing a story, or like, you know, taking people through these life-changing experiences. So I'm really, really lucky that we have such different roles, and mine is a very soft role, and I'm learning to actually be soft in it and not put the pressure of myself that I was putting on, trying to like think that I wasn't worthy of this role as the founder of the Breath Haus if I wasn't so busy all the time, which led me into hospital twice in the last year. So I think that I'm slowly finding a balance of like rushing slowly. I'm getting really, when you guys told me that was the name of the podcast, I was like, oh my God, it like hit a part of my soul, because I was like, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. But yeah, I think that the growth of Breath Haus is because I get to be the front of it, and I get to be the authentic, strange, goofy one who just kind of shares everything that she feels and just is a bit of a dork, and Nathan gets to kind of be the grounding behind that, and I'm like up in the sky with the clouds, and he's like down here on the ground holding onto my leg being like, no, you have to do this, no, you can't keep giving away all of the classes for free, no, you have to do this, like not everyone needs you to be so empathetic towards them. And I'm like,
no,
yes,
you can't
do.
go and buy literally like 24 roses on Valentine's Day and give them to the whole entire class,
no,
plus
you
chocolates.
Can't buy everyone Loco Loves every time. No, not everyone gets a $7 chocolate every time they come to a class. No, but we're very lucky that we have the opposite roles, and that we're so good at our roles. And I'm very, very lucky that I have him, because he's just like an absolute superstar.
You both are. You're a great team. You work so beautifully together, and it's a testament to both of you and your individuality in what you've created.
And another thing that I think that is such a big part of why we are growing the way that we're growing is because like we're just doing us. Like we're not trying to, like I respect and I understand that breathwork is this ancient practice, and it's like there's so much more than what like this that we're doing now. Like it goes so much further back, but we're just trying to make it fun, and we're trying to make it relatable, and we're trying to make it cheeky, and we're trying to just make it like, you know, you don't realize that ASAP's going to be playing in a class, or that like freaking Green Day is going to be on, or whatever it is. It's like, it's not what you expect. It's not what you think. It's not all wind chimes and sound bowls. And like, we love that. Like we love that. I play sound bowls every class, but it's not this like chanting and humming and like this really scary experience. I think that it's just like relatable, and like I hate saying this, but it's Instagrammable. And I think most people sometimes, not most people, I think some people come because it's like, I want to take a photo, and then they lay down and they're like, oh, what? But like in the best way, but they're like, I just came to take a photo and post about it, and then like they lay down and have a life-changing experience, and I'm like, cool, keep coming, tell your friends to do that, you know?
Hook, line and sinker.
Exactly. So I think that the fact that we're not making it too, you know, when we do our beach communities, like I'm doing the breath work, but then we've got like the most intense freaking R&B playlist where we all do ice baths, and it's not like this, it's a super spiritual experience every time internally, but it doesn't have to be like this external kind of really visceral, really loud moment. It can be really like powerful and really quiet, you know? And I think that it's not, we're not trying to make everyone primal scream in an hour-long class at 7:30 on a Tuesday night, because that's going to jar everyone. So I think that that's why we're like,
totally relatable. That's the key.
And rushing slowly.
Well, I mean, the role of collaboration, right? Like how nice to be collaborating with someone who has a different set of skills, right? No doubt that that's going to be so helpful. I'm wondering, do you feel comfortable to talk about your experiences of burnout and how that impacted you?
Oh my God, I would love to. I love talking about it because I just feel like people don't get it. So when we first opened, I was charged up off the fact that I had a business that was like my passion then becoming like all of a sudden it turned into a business, like this thing that I was doing just for fun kind of. And because I thought it was so cool, all of a sudden was like classes were booking out a week in advance with a wait list. So I was charged on a different level. And for the first 8 months, I took almost every single class, and I also took every private we took. And I also did, when I look back at my days, I was doing like 3 one-on-ones into 2 classes, into getting up at 6 a.m. and going to the gym and then doing it again. And in October last year, I ran myself into the ground the first time, and I ended up it was only tonsillitis, but it took me out for 2.5 weeks. Like I could not get out of bed for 2.5, nearly 3 weeks. And then I couldn't go back to even close to the capacity after that. It was like, it took me a long time to kind of come back to myself. But then just recently I started to feel really, I feel strange saying this one, but I'm going to say it. I started to feel not very grateful, and I started to like see a full class, and I was like, oh, really? And I was like going into Windsor, and I would be like, people obviously like are so excited to see me, and I'm like, please don't cuddle me, like please don't come near me. And I started to like actually not enjoy it. And I would resent the people when I saw people that I know wanted something from me, like a cuddle or whatever in a class. I'd be like, oh, and I'd have to fully brace, and I just would not be able to be present because I had nothing to give. And so I took myself to Tasmania for 12 days, and I turned my phone off for 8 of them, and I sat by myself in an Airbnb alone with no phone, which was the most exhilarating thing ever. And I thought that that was enough for me, and I felt good coming back. But to be completely honest, I was still faking the goodness. Like, yeah, I felt noticeably fuller, but I was still kind of like, cool, like, you know, fake it till you make it kind of thing. I was like, I've had the rest, like you've done enough. You've had 8 days off, or 8 days with no phone, and then 12 days away. That's enough. Like, stop being ungrateful. And I was kind of coming back being like, you've got it, yay, and fully faking it. And then on Lionsgate, on the 8th of the 8th, halfway through a Zoom that I was facilitating, I just started to have a seizure. And I had like a 4-minute seizure. Wow. And then I went to the hospital and had a few more. And then that was my body obviously being like, stop now. And I had only come back to work for like a week prior to that, and I'd come back slowly, and I'd been spending my mornings by myself, and I'd been turning my phone off for the first time part of the day, and I stopped drinking coffee, and I was focusing on sleep and eating earlier in the day and all that kind of stuff. But like, it obviously wasn't enough. So when I was like, I kind of just came to when we were sitting in the emergency room, and I was like, what am I doing here? And Nathan's like, you had a seizure. And I'm like, what? And I just had no idea what had happened. And then I remember being checked in, and then I woke up again the next morning, and he's like, yeah, you had some more seizures. And I was like, wow, not just one. I don't have epilepsy, by the way, either. Well, I have medication for it now, but I didn't have epilepsy. So I think that was my body kind of being like, you didn't take it seriously enough. And then I went home to Byron for like another 2.5 weeks. And then I came back, and now I feel like so good, like proper so good. And like, I feel I can cry with gratitude again. And I have the capacity to be present with people after class. And I feel excited about things, and I feel like I'm myself again, like wholeheartedly. But I'm also doing so many things differently now, and I'm stopping with the pressure. And I'm, you know, my phone being off for me is my biggest slow thing. Like keeping it off and spending the first little bit of my day just existing and not trying to put any pressure on myself. And some days I can't do that. Like this morning I had a big day of stuff. So I got up at 6, and my friend was picking me up at 6:15, and I was on my phone straight away. But like tomorrow morning, I won't be on my phone for the first hour and a half of the day, and I'll just exist. I might journal, I might stretch, I might breathe, I might just drink tea on the couch. Like I might go for a walk without my phone. That's exhilarating. But yeah.
I need to take a leaf out of that book, honestly. You don't realize how much that impacts your mind when that's the first thing you reach for as soon as you wake up. And I'm such a guilty culprit of that being the device, the first thing that pings the minute I open my eyes.
Do you have a Whoop or something?
No.
Because you can watch your heart rate go from tiny to absolutely through the roof as soon as you do pick it up.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy to think that there's obviously a direct correlation with pushing yourself, rushing, being so busy, and your health. And what you've just shared twice in 12 months to have been completely derailed with the tonsillitis and then with the seizures, that is just no we shouldn't put that much pressure on ourselves to work that hard, because that's ultimately what happens, really, to sort of be very much layman's terms. When you work that hard and you're not taking care of yourself, you're not prioritizing your needs, you're taking on everyone's energy and everyone else's needs. Like, your health is the first thing to go, and it's the most important thing that we can possibly have in our possession is our health.
And I had this guilt that like Nathan was doing so much all the time. And like, this is like my own stuff from way back of like my self-worth and all that kind of stuff. I had this guilt, like if I wasn't doing enough, I wasn't worthy of this title, and like it was going to get taken away from me, and I wasn't going to be a founder, and I wasn't like a boss, and I wasn't any of that kind of stuff. So it was like, honestly, the seizures and being in hospital, and then my mum having to fly down to Melbourne and be like, we're going home to Byron, whether you like it or not. And that happening was kind of like, okay. And then Nathan was like, you don't get it. Your job is not being busy. Like, your job is actually resting and actually not doing anything. And that's when I finally was like, oh, it's okay. And it was like this, like I had to really unpack some shit to let myself rest properly, and like give myself permission not to put my phone on, and like give myself permission to actually stop, because it's so hard. And it's just so you know, when I say I turn my phone off for 8 days and I leave my phone off in the morning, it's hard. It's not like I just turn my phone off and I'm like, fun. Like, for the first 2 days in Tassie, when I was by myself in a shack on the beach, I did all of the meal prep. All the food I bought, I meal prepped. I cleaned the Airbnb that was already clean. And it wasn't until the second day that I was like, stop doing stuff. And I'd done all the jobs that I could, because I was like, just turn your phone on, you're needed. And Nathan and I would email, because I had my laptop, because I watched Criminal Minds, and because I had to have like a little bit of something, but like he'd email and be like, yeah, we're all good. And I'm like, you sure you don't need me? And he's like, no. And it took me 2 full days to actually not be looking for it and not be looking for something to do. And then I would just sit, and it was just like, it all just started to come back to me. Like, it was the reminder, and it's all there. It's just like, we're so busy, and like, we're not worthy of anything if we are slow, because it's this hustle, build, grind, go, you know, constantly.
Couldn't have said it better ourselves.
Yeah.
But there's so many important things, especially, I mean, this idea of our worth being tied to our achievements, which is something that we've spoken about before and will continue to speak about. But I just want to touch on something that this experience of having a seizure or multiple seizures sounds terrifying. Like, did that rock you?
It was a pretty big wake-up call.
Yeah.
It was the confusion after, and being in hospital after, and like, I kind of am very much brush it off and get on with it. Like, yeah, sometimes I'm a sook, and yeah, sometimes I'm all that, but like, I very much am just like, cool, let's go, like, next thing kind of thing. And I actually think I take a little bit of that from Nathan, because he's like very much like, cool, let's get on with it. And when I was in hospital and they're like, no, you're staying, no, you're having another MRI, no, you're having an EEG today, oh no, you've actually got to have a CAT scan today. And I was kind of like, what do you mean? I'm good, like I'm back, I'm here. And that was pretty confronting. It's just like, it's interesting, like my body, I very much knew before. I cried my eyes out on the flight to Tasmania, because I was like so depleted and I was so done, and I was just like, what am I doing? And I just didn't even know if I wanted to be a part of Breath Haus. I was like, have I bitten off more than I can chew? And I felt like so sad and ungrateful and just like so upset about it all. And then like being in Tassie, I started to like remember why and like have the time to fill myself up. And then when I came back, I was like, cool, we're doing well, we're doing great. And then like, I hadn't even started taking in-person classes yet. I think I'd only taken one. And then I was like, Zooms are different, because it is a different energy exchange I find on a Zoom, because it's not the talk before and the talk after, which is such an important part of facilitating an in-person class and such a special part of it. So I was like, it's different. But then when my body physically stopped me partway through a Zoom, and like the seizures not happening when I was by myself with my phone off in Tassie, and then happening when I was on a Zoom, when someone could, like, everyone on the Zoom was like calling the Breath Haus number and getting me like help as quickly as they could, you know, like
Crazy
5 days before, and I'm
experience.
by myself with my phone off in the middle of Tasmania alone, you know. So it was like the universe was kind of like, here, we're going to put you right down to the ground right now in front of everyone so you can't run. But yeah. I'm really, in reflection now, and like I say this about every part of my life, I'm so happy that it happened, and I'm so happy about all of the things that have happened. Tonsillitis, all the burnouts, all of the drama of my life before that. Like, I am very happy with who I am, and I'm very happy with all of the lessons, no matter how painful.
That's exactly what I was about to say, because really that's what it is at the end of the day. It's a lesson, isn't it? And, you know, sometimes we've got to learn lessons the hard way. And, you know, you speak about hustle and you know, what is it all worth if at the end of the day you don't have your health and your well-being? And, you know, it poses the question, can we have it all? And that really is the crux of what this podcast is all about. And sometimes I don't think we really can. Like, you can't push yourself that hard and expect yourself not to crash.
But also, do you want it all if you can't sit with yourself without any distractions, and like be like, if you're not actually happy with who you are when there's nothing there? You know what I mean? Like, we're like, yeah, okay, it's all good and well to be like busy and in the gym and then straight to work and then out on the weekends and then having dinners and doing all these things. But like, what about when you're just with yourself? Like what happened? Like, is it worth it if when you're sitting with, like, can you even stop? Like, can you even sit still? And what happens then? What happens in the silence? Like, why can't you sit through a still breathwork session? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that makes sense. What I'm trying to say.
It makes total sense. And it's like, if you are building an empire based off trying to fill up a feeling of emptiness, then you're building something on really fragile foundations, and you know, eventually the cracks will show. But Megzy has a good point. Like, really, the crux of this podcast is trying to figure out or answer this question of like, is it possible? Like, is it possible to be striving for success and status and, you know, to be really ambitious whilst also maintaining our health and well-being? And so I'd love to know where
if you have a business partner like Nathan Freeman, maybe.
Where do I get one?
I don't know. I don't know. He's one of a kind, but like, I honestly think that, I mean, I hope, like, this is only a few weeks into this kind of new norm for me. And today I got up at 6 and I was straight out the door, and I didn't have my phone time, and I didn't have that time because I think sometimes I do own a business and I do have 3 studios and I do have a lot of people that kind of need my attention, and, you know, my time for me looks different each day. But I really do want to do my best to rush a little slower and to be a little bit more present, and to not be like, I think the chaos of me is my superpower when I'm grounded. But I think that when I'm just rushing and there's no slowness and there's no time for me, I don't think it's very good for anyone. So I don't know yet because I'm only a few weeks into this, but I do feel pretty good and pretty grounded at the moment. And I am definitely being a little slower. But like, honestly, this little phone that we have that you can't see I'm pointing at, but like, our phones are the best and the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And I just think that if we can, rushing slowly can be like just like having some time in your day without that, whether it's the first hour of the day, whether it's like sitting with the discomfort of turning it off when you walk into your house at nighttime, and just like being with yourself for the night. And watch TV if you have to watch TV, but it's different watching TV and being present than it is. And like, do you even want to watch what you're watching, or are you just like putting it on in the background while you're scrolling through Instagram and messaging people? You know, like, how busy are you if you put that down?
The best and the worst thing. It's exactly what it is. And we're so attached to these little devices that just constantly ping us for our attention. But I think it's the perfect segue. And I mean, I know you've already shared that. That's a great tool. And I definitely, like I said, definitely need to try a little more to implement that into my own life, just being a little bit more disconnected from my device. But we do like to round out our episodes by asking all of our guests, you were our first, so thanks for being the first that we asked this question to, but we do ask it to each other each week. What is helping you in this moment to slow down?
Honestly, I'm going to say again, the phone. Starting my day when I can, just by myself, and just having my journal and just writing down the things that I need to write down instead of quickly doing them all on my phone, just being present with myself. Also, I was really addicted to coffee pre all of those Tassie and seizure moments. Not having as much coffee is helping my whole life. And I also think that spending some time reading instead of watching TV, even though the reading is sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes I'm like, I don't want to do this right now, but like forcing myself to just do a few pages is like it's a nice way to just like exist and to like quiet, and doing this at nighttime instead of like watching a movie, and just notice how quickly you fall asleep when you read instead of watch something. But my biggest thing is turn your phone off for a bit and remember it's going to feel so uncomfortable and then all of a sudden it's going to feel so free. But you have to sit with that discomfort for the moment of freeness.
Well,
we could keep going for hours, but we won't.
I mean, thank you so much, Ella. I'm sure that everyone listening agrees with, so grateful for you in sharing this little slice of your story. And it's always a real privilege to kind of gain insight into the inner workings of someone's life and business, and to really understand what does happen behind closed doors, because what we see on these little devices is only, often the highlight reel, and often behind that is so much hustle and hardship and everything in between. So again, thank you. And we look forward to following the journey and the Breath Haus and all of the growth that is on the way. So if people do want to contact you or find you, what is the best way that they can do that?
The Breath Haus _ on Insta. Or I'm the Breath Boss, but the Breath Haus is probably a better page.
You are the Breath Boss.
I'm the
You
Breath
are
Boss.
the Breath
You are
Boss.
the goddamn Breath Boss.
I am the Breath Boss.
Amazing.
We so appreciate you taking the time out, and I just adore you and cannot wait for all of the exciting things that we're lucky enough that you've shared with us. You've got so much more to come. So if what you've created in 1 year, I can't wait to see what you create in another 2 or 3. But as long as you're taking time to just be slow and be present along the way. But yeah, love you so much. Thank you for
having me.
coming on. Yay!
The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If any of the topics we covered today feel overwhelming, we recommend seeking individual support. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please contact Lifeline on 131114 or 13 Yarn on 139276.